Welcome to podcast 19 of the Relationship Restaurant. We are Poppy and Jeff Spencer. Delighted you could join us once again with hopefully some great inspirational thoughts Poppy and I have been working on for the holiday season.
So this month for us, one of the traditions that we do is have a Christmas movie month. And we line it up just like Hallmark does, but we line it up and we tee it up and we make sure that we see all of our favorite movies. And
we've already covered the Santa Claus and the Grinch.
But we held out for my personal favorite, which was The Family Stone. And being a psychology professor, I love the psychology behind all of these human interactions that they have, and the dynamics in the family is incredible.
This movie is just chock full of all kinds of odd social and family interplays and interdynamics. It's fun to watch, fun to examine. It's a great thing to look at your own life and reflect on how things are going and how you can do things better.
So The Family Stone was produced about 12 years ago. And if you have not seen it yet, you might want to share this podcast, listen later on.
Yeah, this is a spoiler alert. We're going to cover things thoroughly.
And we think this is such a fun idea that we have that we might use our upcoming podcast for the same reason, because we get so many good messages from books, from movies, and obviously this is something that we can take into our personal lives.
And the holidays are always a time that can be chock full of challenging emotions and challenging family dynamics. So a show like this does a great job in tackling so many of them. It's really a microcosm of emotions. A gay couple starts the entire show off, and it's a mixed race within that gay couple. And there's also a disability within that couple. So right off the bat, the first two people you meet in the movie have three things that are unusual dynamics.
Well, it's one of the few people that you meet in the movie. We first meet, this movie has an all-star cast. It's Diane Keaton, it's Craig T. Nelson, Sarah Jessica Parker,
Claire
Danes, Luke Wilson, Rachel McAdams. Mm-hmm. It just goes on. And Dermot Mulroney, of course, is Everett, who is the oldest male in the family stone.
It does kind of start with he and Sarah Jessica Parker, doesn't it? That's kind of where...
So anyway, the other themes that are included here are cancer and death. And of course, one of our common things that we hear when we work with our clients in our relationship
and
consulting
our own lives
is waiting till after the holidays to impart significant or sometimes sad news to other family members. People want to hold back. So there's secrecy. That's a theme. There's drug usage in the movie. There's sharing or not sharing of family heirlooms. And then, of course, there's always that pecking order and the birth order. And just because you were born first means that you get to dominate the decision-making in the family.
And judgments, passing judgments and extending judgments on others. Non-acceptance of outsiders. This is a big one that's played in the show.
And so maybe some of you have that in your own life experiences where you have in-laws or outlaws, as they're sometimes called, that just don't seem to fit well in the family. So hopefully we can give you some tips here. We can take some ideas from the Family Stone to see how we can bring those relationships into a better embracing and inclusive manner. One of the things that we love to do is look at the different personalities, because in all of our families, we all have different personalities. So we just sort of did a fun list. As a Myers-Briggs certified person, we took down the personalities, and we thought that Susanna, the oldest female in the Family Stone, the oldest daughter, might be an INFJ. She'd have a preference for introversion, intuitive, a feeler, and a judger. Everett would probably be an ENFJ, an extrovert, an intuitive, a feeler, and a judger. Thad, who's hearing impaired and gay, he'd probably be an INFP. He's an introvert, preference for introversion, intuition, a feeler, and a perceiver. He kind of keeps some of those thoughts, those great insights, very intuitive, very sensitive, keeps those inside. Ben, who is a character played by Luke Wilson, very laid back, kind of crazy. He'd probably be an E/I, maybe a preference for both introversion and extroversion, a sensor, and maybe a thinker feeler, maybe a combination, and a perceiver. And a perceiver is somebody that really doesn't have a dire need to meet a deadline or make a decision quickly. They really love the idea of just enjoying the moment, being spontaneous, and going with the flow.
Mm-hmm.
And then Amy, who is Rachel McAdams, is the youngest of the family and is the one who is most opposed to Meredith, played by Sarah Jessica Parker, coming into the family fold, right?
Right, and she makes sure everybody's lined up with her, too.
Right.
Real troublemaker.
She's probably has an extroversion, intuitive, a feeler, and a perceiver. She, too, doesn't have the need to conform to deadlines or timelines or anything else. Then there's Patrick, who's Thad's husband. He's probably an extrovert preference and a sensor, a thinker, and a judger. He keeps things rolling. He's on time.
He can make decisions,
He
yes.
kind of holds people accountable in the family in a very gentle and courageous way. And then Meredith, who's Sarah Jessica Parker, she's probably an E/I preference, intuitive, a thinker, and a judger. Everything she does is meticulous. It's detailed. It has to be perfect. She's very uptight. Julie, played by her sister, is a Claire Danes. She's probably an INFP. She kind of goes with the flow. She has a preference for introversion. She's intuitive. She's a feeler, and she's a perceiver. And Brad, who is Amy's old boyfriend, that's Rachel McAdams' old boyfriend, he is an EMT, I believe.
Correct, yes. Mm-hmm.
And he's probably an INFP. He's introvert, an intuitive, a feeler, and a perceiver. He also goes with the flow. And then, of course, Diane Keaton is Sybil, the mom, and she is an ENFP/J. She's an extrovert. She's intuitive. She's a feeler, and she's the P/J. We gave her both because she has that flexibility to be spontaneous, but also wants things in certain good order. And then Kelly, who is Craig T. Nelson, is the dad. We gave him the ranking of ISFP. It's an introvert, a sensor, a feeler, and a perceiver.
Yeah, I'm just, as we're looking at this, Poppy, I'm just also realizing that Sybil probably has more of a tendency towards a J because, as we both know, having two P's in a relationship can be a big, big problem because nobody can make decisions, nobody can move things forward, and can be a great source of conflict. So I think she's probably more on the J side because someone's got to keep things going forward. And I think she does.
Right. But she also can be spontaneous.
Mm-hmm.
She can also do that. So that's why we gave her that dual designation for that.
So what are the dynamics in your family? That's one of the things that hopefully this podcast and these examinations of personalities can get you looking at your own family dynamics. And you can say, gosh, I've never really thought about my family in these terms of what are their personality traits. And that can make a huge, huge difference in how you interact with each other, especially with the extra charge of the holidays here that we have to deal with. Because within a large family, there is always bound to be chaos. In the midst of all this chaos, we have joy, we have sadness. And in this movie, we see both a lot of happy and sad tears. And they're back and forth like a 9-month term pregnant woman. Which is one of the characters, by the way. That's the solid Susanna.
Susanna.
She is in that category.
Yeah. And so one of the things that we wanted to share with you today is to consider how are outsiders or in-laws embraced or accepted in your family or not. Amy, who's played by Rachel McAdams, the youngest in the movie.
And she was first to actually meet this gal Meredith, Sarah Jessica Parker's character,
in a prior
time and with her brother. So she'd had a lot of interaction with her and not good interaction. She didn't like her at all. So she was very, very quick to warn the rest of the family tribe ahead of time here and point out all of the different things that they needed to make fun of her throat clearing thing and ridicule and get everybody queued up. She circles the wagons in a very defensive posture so that they all will hate Meredith as well because that's what she wants.
It's like, what does she really want, though? If we were to pull back the curtain on that, what do you think Amy really wants?
I'd say protecting her brother because she knows that this person is so wrong for her brother.
Right for him, right. And so one of the things that we also want to ask you to consider is who jockeys for attention in your family of origin? Who teases, who ridicules? Who might revert back to their child self in the family hierarchy, even though you're all adults at this point? A lot of times I know in my family dynamic, when it was just my brother and me, oftentimes, whenever the four of us got back together, my dad has since passed, but whenever we got back together, my brother, who's older, would always sort of take charge over that position in the family hierarchy. And I sometimes found myself reverting back to my 10-year-old self, even though I'm clearly an adult. So that's just something for you to consider. How might you change that belief so that you don't get pigeonholed into being the middle or the youngest or the oldest? If you have a tendency to dominate, maybe you can dial that back a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And there is lots of conflict in this movie and lots of opportunities to understand how best to deal with it. And one of the first things that happens, this Meredith that we're speaking of, Sarah Jessica Parker's role, she insists on, even though that she's been living with Everett and dating, and they've obviously been intimate, she insists on not staying in his room, even though the mother is saying
totally
fine and says it is absolutely okay and expects them to do it. She insists on not being there and chooses to stay in Amy's room, putting Amy out. Amy, the one who already can't stand her, is already now thrown to the couch to make room for Meredith.
And it's just interesting in a family dynamic, and maybe you all can relate to this too, that why is it always the youngest person that is the first to be imposed upon?
Mm-hmm.
Why is that person always the one that's like, well, make her do it?
Well, that happens in our family. Our youngest always got thrown out of her room. She was on the sofa.
Why not throw out the oldest person or the oldest kid in the room? No, we just don't do that. It's so silly.
And then there's this character, Meredith, when there was so much conflict with Amy the following morning that she actually makes a decision to move out of the house to the local inn where the other son and his husband
or boyfriend
were already living or staying. And so she actually completely withdraws. That's how she dealt with it. She withdrew from it and stonewalled. And then also for her reinforcement, called her sister, played by Claire Danes, to come and support her and help her because she felt so desperate and so out of the loop.
So think about the ways in which you might call in the cavalry if you need extra support, if you feel ganged up on, if you don't feel included. And then likewise, think about how you might be inclusive and so that anyone doesn't feel ostracized.
I'm sure that there are family members that you can turn to when you're feeling that way, that you can get support. And we see that within our own family when there's always siblings that team up and come to each other's rescue when things are not going with the way they want. And that's a very common thing.
Right. Here we have in this situation, Everett, who's the oldest male, is bringing in this outsider, basically to the family. And he then assumes his maybe prior position as a oldest male in the family and kind of yells at the family in the kitchen. And here's how this is going to go down. He's the boss. He's going to say, you're going to accept her. I think when that doesn't meet with finally the father of the family, the patriarch, Craig T. Nelson comes in, Kelly, and says,
that.
You need to...
We're all going to be gracious and accepting. And, in the spirit of the holidays here, we're going to be making sure we welcome her to our home and show a little bit better manners.
And even the pregnant Susanna, who has maybe a 7 or 8-year-old little girl who steals Meredith's shoe to play dress up, breaks the shoe. And if it's any of the shoes from Sex and the City, it was, a monolobonic shoe, that it was probably a fortune. Meredith goes upstairs to put her shoes away and murmurs under her breath that it's, she probably can find another pair of shoes to go with the outfit. So everything that Meredith does and is boxed into a very tight package, everything that she does. And as she leaves, Luke Wilson, who plays Ben, the sort of easygoing brother, says, hey, don't dilly-daddle, we're all going to be talking about you when you walk away. And he laughs when he says it, but of course, it's exactly what does happen.
That's exactly what takes place.
And so that's how they deal with conflict. Here you've got this one character that's pretty much telling him this is how it's going to happen. And then the others that whisper behind her back.
And probably one of the biggest moments in this movie.
The most uncomfortable scene.
And we even know people that have literally had to leave the room because they felt so uncomfortable watching this portion of the movie. They have a dinner conversation wherein the sister of Meredith actually starts this conversation because the gay couple is talking about adopting a baby. And she's asking, because one of them is white and one is black, do they have a preference for which race the baby will be? And that kind of opens a door for...
And they handle it gracefully, and they say, no, we just want a healthy baby.
Right, and we're just very excited about having a child. We don't care. And that kind of opens the door for Meredith now, decides to kind of ride along on this and ask questions about the gay environment and the effect that might have, nurturing versus nature.
And won't that be a challenge? And both Sybil and Craig T. Nelson, the dad, Kelly, are getting uncomfortable. And so is Thaddeus, who is the hearing impaired brother. And he's very sensitive. He's getting alarmed. He's not quite sure what she's getting at, but he knows it's not good. And his husband, Patrick, is trying to explain that this is, I think we've been hit here, And Meredith, in her need to be right and in her need to try and reconcile what she's saying. Try to
fix this conversation.
Because she's not asking, her approach is not asking and using the right communication.
She makes it worse and worse.
She makes it worse. And as she's delving into this sensitive social issue, and finally there's fist pounding and yelling and fork throwing, and she eventually bails. And Everett kind of just lets her go, her boyfriend. So
fiance,
it was just
almost fiance.
Fiance. So it's just kind of an interesting dynamic as people that understand human dynamics and the psychology of human behavior that we research all the time. Was there a better way that might have been handled? Is there a better way to communicate that?
And Everett was basically angry with her, too. He kind of strung her out as well. He didn't do anything to rescue her. In fact, he exacerbated the situation.
Right, because he didn't say anything. It's kind of like, what can we do as relationship experts to give people those tools and skills to be able to communicate what they are trying to say? And if they have offended someone, to immediately identify and make amends for it.
Well, that's what Meredith was trying to do, but then she just clearly didn't think through it.
She didn't. She wasn't trying to do that. She was trying to get her point across first and then reconcile it, which we would suggest just the opposite, that you make amends first and then at a later point when everybody is cooled off, or maybe address it in a written word later. This is what I was trying to say, when tempers have lowered, as a way to communicate your point. But that's one of the things that we talk about all the time. Do you want to be right or do you want to feel good? Because it's really hard to do both in that moment. If you are hell-bent on being right, chances are you're not going to feel good.
We'll also talk about how to deal with conflict when you've had this explosion, this horrible dinner situation, and it's ended very badly and everybody's uncomfortable. Craig T. Nelson, the patriarch here, the father, Kelly is his character, makes the very courageous move to go over to the hotel, the inn nearby, to try to find Meredith, try to find the sister, and basically walks in there to say that he wanted to apologize for what took place, when he really had very little to apologize about besides losing his temper, hitting his fist on the table in a fit of rage to try to stop the bleeding of this conversation. And he could see his wife was getting very upset. It's a great move on his part, though, to open the door for reconciliation on all parties. Even though he really shouldn't have been the one apologizing, Meredith is the one that probably needed most to be doing the apologizing.
But in her need to be accepted and to be right, she just kept going full steam forward. So she bails, she cracks up Everett's car. Meanwhile, and this is just a side note, nobody in this family has money as a theme on the table, which is so interesting throughout this movie. Nobody talks about how much something costs or what we're going to do, or that's a concern. Meanwhile, Mara backs the car into a tree, has some dents in it. And
also goes forward into another tree.
I mean, she's a mess. And it has been the laid-back brother who goes after her and, teach her how to lighten up. He goes through a series of putting his hands behind his head. He takes her
to a local tavern, and that's where he tries to get her to loosen up and fly her freak flag, as he says.
Yeah, he said, you have one, we all have one, but you're just not flying it. He's trying to get her to loosen up. She still can't really do it. But then she sees Amy's the youngest, who she's just really consumed with and upset about, and at war with, is Amy. Her old boyfriend comes into the bar. He's an off-duty EMT, and she realizes it's him. And she says, you know what? I'm going to have you come over Christmas morning. You know, how are you going to get Amy back if you still like her if you don't come over? I'm making Christmas
She decides to kind of get under Amy's skin by inviting this guy over.
So she invites him over. The last that the viewer sees is that she and Ben are sort of passed out in the car in some sort of lot somewhere. And the next scene we see, Meredith wakes up in Ben's bed in his room at the Stone family home. The father, Kelly, knocks on the door.
Trying to bring in coffee in the morning.
Ben's in the shower. Sarah Jessica Parker Meredith is in bed. She wakes up. She realizes, oh my gosh, I'm in this room.
I've been caught in the wrong brother's room.
And assumptions and more judgments are even going to be made. And Kelly, the father, is confused and upset and alarmed, but he tiptoes out. And then he grabs, when they all come downstairs in the morning, Everett then has the engagement ring that he's wanted so desperately from his mom.
And also, in the meantime, that same evening, Everett has taken a very good liking and interest in the sister.
Yes.
That he's had a chance to visit with when they're out searching for the strange Meredith, who is off with Ben,
right?
Ben. Mm-hmm.
And Everett has been asking his mother for his grandmother's ring, which is the play on words, the family stone. He has been asking that. It's been promised to him. Sybil, the mom, says, in good heart, I can't give it to you. It's just, she's not right for you. It's not her. It's you. I feel like you're trying to be so perfect. Basically, she's saying she looks good on paper, but I don't see it. And she's trying to shake her son into, some
realization of this.
Mm-hmm. The next morning, Jessica Parker is, let's open presents. The little girl is there, the granddaughter, and Susanna, let's open presents. Everybody's saying, where were you last night? Everyone wants to know where everybody was last night. So there's a lot of redirection in this movie where the two sisters are locked in the bathroom. Everett wants to see the ring, what it looks like, and he puts it on Julie's hand, not Meredith. Everybody says, isn't that kind of bad luck? Isn't that...
It's also just a very weird dynamic.
It's a weird dynamic.
Because he does have a high level of interest in this woman and not in the woman who is supposed to be receiving it, the sister.
Julie is shaming her sister, like, you slept with the brother? Oh my gosh. And she's, I'm so ashamed. She doesn't remember that she slept with the brother. She was wasted. And so they start to open presents, and Meredith comes off with the best gift of Christmas. She has a picture framed for everybody, a photo for all of the family members of Sybil, pregnant with a baby.
And Sybil, who, I don't know if we were saying, is dying basically from cancer. There's a very huge underlying tone here of sadness that they're all trying to work around. And this moment where the Meredith, this person who's been so outcast, kind of crashes through this barrier with this picture and raises all kinds of emotion, especially with the sister Amy, who has been so terrible to her. Amy starts sobbing and tries to apologize, but can't even get the word sorry out. She just says, I'm, and it's clear she's trying to apologize, but can't say the word sorry.
After they open these gifts, Everett says, wait a minute, I want to talk to you. Meredith assumes that he's going to ask her to marry him in front of his family. And
stops him.
Then she stops him. She said, I will not marry you. He goes, that's not the question I'm going to ask. And now she's like totally overwhelmed and confused. It's like, why is my sister wearing the family stone on her finger if you're not going to ask me to marry you? So it's this chaotic thing. And she goes, well, I know what you all think of me, and she's finally vulnerable. One of our favorite things. She's finally vulnerable. She says exactly how she's feeling. I don't feel accepted.
And she tells the truth about what they are really thinking.
She tells it, you just think that I'm a
spoiled brat from,
know. And she said she comes into town and she sleeps with his brother, and everyone's like, what? Everybody's like this. And Ben, who's tried on one of his Christmas presents, is a beautiful houndstooth jacket.
In the middle of this revelation goes houndstooth, right? It's a houndstooth jacket.
That's where we talk about.
They're great at constantly redirecting tensions. So if a conversation is going away they don't want, they can push it somewhere else, which is one of the great skills that Poppy and I always talk about in these tense moments in a holiday, learning that great gift, that great skill of redirection. So when you do have those uncomfortable moments, you can try to steer away from them getting worse and worse.
And it helps to give you time to think, to recalibrate, to get your thoughts back in order. It really does help to do that. So at that point, Everett is just like, what? You slept? And he's looking around the room, and the hearing impaired brother Thad says, don't look at me.
Because he's gay.
So all of a sudden the music builds, and this fun, like nutcracker sweet music starts playing, and the two older brothers start racing around the room, chasing each other. I didn't sleep with her. He never did sleep with her. He slept on the floor.
Oh, and also the little scene in the kitchen that amplifies this whole thing.
So Meredith, before that, she gets up and goes in the kitchen. I'm going to make my family tradition of making the strata.
The strata that she'd already worked on very diligently is in the refrigerator, and she takes it out and gets knocked by a door. A swinging door, and is wearing this horrible concoction all over herself and the floor.
This egg mix.
And so people are falling in this mess. Brothers are wrestling, fighting. It is just a chaotic disaster.
The conflict and chaos kind of go hand in hand here. It's constantly one thing upon the other. It makes us think about, as Meredith is completely vulnerable, it is at that turning point in the movie where people finally accept her. The whole family accepts her. Amy starts to cry, and she feels badly
ashamed of how she's been doing
so horrible to her. It's just something to think about. When we're vulnerable, even though it sounds like we're being weak, that's when you're most embraced
empowered.
And most embraced. We wanted to share with you some traditions that were handed down in the family to have you think about that. So in the family stone, the wedding ring was given to Everett.
Yeah, the movie kind of ends with them trying to recreate this Christmas, because a year later, following Christmas, the mother, Sybil, Diane Keaton's character, has died from her cancer. They're all trying to still muddle through and decorate the tree and do all these things. They can't find the ornaments. They can't find the stockings. It's a real challenge. That's always the case when someone is not there to try to recreate these things, especially the matriarch who was in charge of all this. Amy kind of ends up assuming that role, I think, with now husband Brad. I believe they're married.
Or boyfriend.
Whatever they were at the time.
Yeah. So we don't really know what that is. But think about that. What are some of the family traditions that you have in your family that have gone on and on? I know in the movie, in the very beginning of the movie, Sybil holds an ornament as she's staring at the tree, and a very reflective look, and she's very insightful. And at the end of the movie, that same ornament is picked up by the little girl Elizabeth, and she hands it to Meredith. It makes us wonder, was that like an olive branch to Meredith for breaking her expensive shoe the Christmas before? And then Meredith hands that same precious special ornament on to Amy. So maybe that's the signal that Amy will consider that family tradition. One of the things that it's one of my favorite stories to tell is of a holiday where a mom and a daughter, a 12-year-old daughter, were making ham and preparing it to put in the oven, bake it. And the mom cut off about a quarter of the end of the ham before she put it in the pan. And the little girl, being inquisitive and curious, said, why do you do that? And she said, well, Grandma always prepared it this way. She goes, I don't know, maybe it makes it more juicy or not, or whatever. We didn't know. So the little girl took it one step further, and she said, well, let's call Grandma and ask her why she does that. So they call the grandma 8 states away and said, Mom and I are making the ham, Grandma. We just wanted to know why you cut off the ham. She said, well, my mother always did that. And she said, well, why did your mother always do that? And she said, because your great grandmother didn't have a large enough pan for the ham.
For the large ham.
So the ham. So, 4 generations have been taught to do something with no rhyme or reason or why.
Because it was a tradition,
as far as it just was a tradition. So just kind of look at why you have traditions, examine them, what that...
Some of them don't make a whole lot of sense, but they're still wonderful traditions that you love to do. And Poppy and I were talking about these. There's your favorite things to consider this holiday season. And what are your favorite traditions? I know we were just talking about this earlier. I love the movie White Christmas. It's got great singing and great things, but one of the things I've loved, I've watched it my entire life. And so it always takes me back to all my Christmases throughout my life, watching that movie. So no matter where I've been or who I've been with or what I've been doing, it always takes me back to all my Christmases get bundled together in that movie.
This 2017 Christmas wouldn't be complete unless
Without
you watch
that.
the movie.
Correct.
So these are the things we want you to do. We have 5 things we want you to consider. Of course, there could be more, but write down 5 of your favorite things you enjoy doing. In fact, all of the members of your family can do this. It can be driving around looking at holiday lights that people have. It could
Watching those movies we mentioned.
It could be going to church. Maybe preparing certain foods. Maybe a family recipe is passed down. Certainly in the movie, Sarah Jessica Parker, Meredith, and her sister Claire Danes, Julie.
Christmas cookies happen now too, you know.
Right. And they made strata.
Sure.
That was their family tradition, you know, the Christmas morning. Some people have a yearly annual ornament exchange. There's decorating.
Christmas music. I love all the Christmas carols and singing those.
So for me, Christmas morning with stockings from Santa filled is definitely my non-negotiable. I don't ever want that to change. I don't want something to come up and say, no, you can't do Christmas morning, you know, for some reason. And this is a tradition that I'd like to keep going. So number 2.
You know, sending out Christmas cards. We find that more and more we're getting away from the traditional snail mail routines, but this is a great tradition. To receive these cards is always loads of fun. It's a way you can often stay in touch with people, get a message that they're okay, and that they're thinking of you. But sending them is also a way for you to reconnect. It's one of those great times where you kind of look at that wonderful list of friends, fill out all those cards, and send those messages. It makes you feel so blessed with all these friends you have in your life that you get to share this moment with.
Even business associates. It's really nice to get those cards too. I know that we certainly can put our favorite pictures and images on social media and blast that, but there's no Google Analytics for what you can give to someone when you send a personal card. I think that's something really neat.
You can take the photos of all the holiday decorations and save those images. So next year you remember what you did and how you did it.
I know. I always have that challenge. Okay, where did I put this? And if you get something new, it's kind of fun to do that. Just going back real quick to the Christmas cards, we have 5 kids between us, and whenever they come into town, because they live out of state, whenever they come into town, they almost beeline for the refrigerator where we've tacked up all of the Christmas photos from everybody, and they scan through it like they're looking for, you know, a wanted picture.
And the cards too.
I mean, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
the Christmas cards, a lot of them are photos.
Mm-hmm.
So the next thing that we want to do is to say, take time each night during this holiday season to say out loud, it's really important that you do that, and write down one thing for which you are grateful. And then bundle all these gratitudes and pack them up with your holiday decorations for next year. We've been doing this for one solid year now. December 31st, we'll have 365 daily gratitudes that we write down. I like that special one just for the holiday time, whether you start the moment you hear this podcast or the night before Christmas, it doesn't really matter. Just so you do it.
And the last thing that we suggest...
and this is the most important.
Because things can get so hectic and tensions can be flying, exhaustion, overwhelm hits all of us. Be willing just to let things go and not get caught up in getting upset about them. Just try to let these things just slide off your back when you get upset about something, and just realize that comes with the season. Don't get engaged with... People are often reaching out because they just want attention. They just want somebody to notice them, and you don't have to engage in a negative fashion with that.
And sometimes it's if they want attention, but they also want a way to connect with you. And they don't have those developed communication skills or social skills to do that. So don't rise to the provocation if someone gets snarky or testy with you. Redirect that and then look at that person in a way that you could engage on a more meaningful and very genuine level. I mean, certainly that happened in the movie the morning that Everett asked his mother for the family stone, the ring. She was irritated that conversation did not go well at all. And she burst in through that infamous swinging door in the kitchen. And where the heck is my coffee? What is all this stuff here? And she was projecting all of that. So a lot of times people project when they don't. It's a defense mechanism when they don't have the proper communication tools to express what they really feel.
That gives us the summary of what we wanted to cover with the family stone and the 5 things you can do to make sure that you have the best possible holiday time. And we look forward to next week. We're going to go to another famous movie and share some more great insights. But until then, we are Poppy and Jeff Spencer, the relationship experts.
And have a wonderful holiday season, whether you celebrate Hanukkah or Christmas or whatever you celebrate. Make that family time really meaningful this year. Have that observational awareness. Take care.
See ya.